current situation is unusually bad and that he could leave the embassy any day now, either because he will be forced out or made to feel so restricted that he might choose to leave on his own. His position there is in jeopardy, one source familiar with the matter said. Assange's exit from the embassy could open a new phase for U.S. investigators eager to find out what he knows. CNN reported in April 2017 that the U.S. has prepared charges to seek the arrest of Assange, who U.S. intelligence agencies believe Russia used as an intermediary to distribute hacked emails from Hillary Clinton's campaign during the 2016 presidential election. Assange and his lawyers say he has been detained without charge for 2,720 days, 53 of those gagged and isolated from visitors and outside communications, and that there is not a shred of evidence that Assange has done anything but publish material just as the establishment media do every day, according to a tweet by his lawyers on May 19. The concern from day one until the present is that if Julian Assange walks out of the embassy, he will be extradited to face what the executive director of the ACLU described as an unprecedented and unconstitutional prosecution under the U.S. Espionage Act, his lawyer Melinda Taylor told CNN. Ecuador's newly elected president, Lenin Moreno, is under increasing pressure from the U.S. to expel Assange, sources say. Moreno described Assange as an inherited problem and more than a nuisance in a television interview in January. Sources familiar also believe Spain exerted pressure on Ecuador after Assange tweeted support for the separatist movements in Catalonia, a northeast region of Spain seeking independence. Recently, the Ecuadorian government cut off Assange's access to the internet, making it virtually impossible for him to manage WikiLeaks. He has also had his access to visitors severely restricted. Assange is now only allowed to see his lawyers, who say their mobile phones are jammed while they are inside the embassy. He is dealing with multiple lawsuits. While the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ecuador declined to comment on Assange's case, it referred CNN to past statements made on the decision to cut his internet access. In statements, the ministry denied mistreatment and suggested Assange had not been abiding by his agreement with Ecuador by publicly discussing the internal affairs of other nations, presumably Spain and the U.S. The ministry acts in the strictest adherence to the Constitution, laws, and international law, according to the March 2018 press release. British authorities have said that they would issue a warrant for Assange's arrest if he were to leave the embassy. He faces charges in the UK for breach of bail for failing to surrender for extradition to Sweden, a charge a British judge upheld in February despite the fact that Sweden stopped investigating an allegation of rape against Assange in 2017. Swedish prosecutors maintain the right to resume the investigation if Assange leaves the embassy, however. In the US, Assange's fate is even more uncertain. Assange's lawyers claim that U.S. officials have maintained a secret grand jury investigation into WikiLeaks for nearly 8 years. For the last 8 years, the UK has refused to either confirm or deny that they have received an extradition request from the US. At the same time, they have refused to provide assurances that Julian will not be extradited to the US if such a request were to be received, and maintained an ever-present vigil of the embassy, notwithstanding a UN directive to take steps to ensure Julian's immediate liberty, Taylor told CNN. Their silence speaks volumes, particularly in light of recent statements from U.S. officials that Julian's arrest and extradition are a priority. Taylor was referring to comments in April 2017 by U.S. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, who said that arresting Assange is a priority. "We've already begun to step up our efforts, and whenever a case can be made, we will seek to put some people in jail," Sessions said at a news conference in El Paso, Texas. Representatives from the U.S. government, including the White House, the Department of Justice, the State Department and the intelligence community either did not respond to request for comment or declined to discuss Assange's cases with CNN. Mr. Assange's presence in the Ecuadorian embassy is a matter between the UK and Ecuador, one State Department official told CNN. As a matter of policy, the Department of State neither confirms nor denies the U.S. government's intention to request extraditions. CIA declined to provide additional comment about Assange and referred CNN to former Director Mike Pompeo's past statements on WikiLeaks, describing the group as a hostile non-state intelligence service rather than a media outlet. Pompeo, though he formerly tweeted his appreciation of WikiLeaks and the role it played in publishing Democratic National Committee emails during the election, told an audience at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in 2017 that the U.S. can no longer give Assange a platform to speak freely and openly using information he's provided by leakers. To give them the space to crush us with misappropriated secrets is a perversion of what our great Constitution stands for. It ends now, Pompeo said. U.S. authorities are also deeply interested in further investigating WikiLeaks' publication of a trove of source codes and documents revealing details about CIA hacking tools in March 2017. The FBI's prime suspect for the leak, revealed in recently unsealed court documents, is a CIA employee who developed some of those tools. The Department of Justice says that individual also managed an encrypted server that contained evidence of child pornography. Both the intelligence community and the Department of Justice continue to investigate the theft, one source familiar with the matter told CNN, though the two investigations are separate. Both would be interested in speaking with Assange about the disclosure if he were to leave the embassy. Assange has had difficulties with his hosts in the past. The most memorable incident came in 2013 when several embassy employees were punished, one of whom was demoted, in part because of Assange's actions while there, according to two sources familiar with the matter, including one source at the Ecuadorian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. At the time, Assange was eager to get involved to help NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden find asylum in Ecuador, establishing WikiLeaks as the preeminent organization for whistleblower protection. He convinced a high-ranking embassy employee to help him. When top officials found out, several employees suffered the consequences, including at least one demotion. Assange has since said he encouraged Snowden to stay in Russia. The Guardian reported last week that the embassy for years had spent millions on protecting Assange using expensive surveillance tools from cameras to spy software while Assange turned around and hacked into the embassy's communication systems. Ecuador has cut off Assange's internet access multiple times, the most recent instance in late March.
Our guest is Glenn Greenwald, the Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, co-founder of The Intercept. Glenn, you wrote that former Ecuadorian President Rafael Correa, in an exclusive interview with The Intercept, denounced his country's current government for blocking Julian Assange from receiving visitors in the embassy in London as a form of torture and a violation of Ecuador's duties to protect Assange's safety and well-being. Can you talk about what's happening with Julian Assange? We're reading reports that the Ecuadorian embassy, that he might be leaving the embassy, which of course would mean he'd be arrested by the British government. What do you understand is taking place?
There's clearly a danger that the current Ecuadorian government, which has become much more subservient and compliant with the demands of Western governments, including those in the U.S. and the UK and in Spain, is willing to trade away the protections that Ecuador for 7 years has maintained it owes to Julian Assange because of the likelihood that he will be persecuted, not in Sweden, but in the United States. Remember, the case in Sweden for sexual assault, the investigation has been dropped and closed. That's no longer pending. What the concern is the Trump administration, specifically Mike Pompeo, who was at the time was the director of the CIA and is now the Secretary of State, along with Jeff Sessions, has said that arresting Julian Assange and putting him in prison is a priority because of the leaks of documents that WikiLeaks has published, because of the journalism that they've done, which just this week, the Freedom of the Press Foundation and the Committee to Protect Journalists have said would pose a grave threat to the First Amendment. So when I interviewed President Correa, he was saying essentially that the way in which Julian Assange has been silenced by blocking his access to the internet, by denying him visitors from the outside world, with the exception of his lawyers and a couple other people, is a violation of his human rights. He's an Ecuadorian citizen. He has formal asylum from Ecuador, and they owe him an obligation to protect his health and safety. And at the same time, doctors who have examined him say that he has very grave threats to his health and can't get treatment for it because of a situation in the embassy. So no matter what you think of Julian Assange, there are serious threats to press freedom being posed and to questions of asylum and the sovereignty of the Ecuadorian government by what's taking place.